Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. I'm here with Coach John Brent.
And I'm here with the vet, Mr. N. Griffin.
So today we are going to talk about something that happened a few weeks ago. And former President Obama came down and visited President Joe Biden, Coach. And it was like a rock star. And the President of the United States, who is Joe Biden, was kind of put out there as an afterthought.
Yeah.
And I'm going to cover in a minute. I'll cover how that the protocol is actually supposed to be, and that is a shame because they made the president look about that big because we couldn't let egos suffice. And the former president knows this, and he should have had the intestinal fortitude to say something to stop it. But anyway, I'll throw that out there first.
Well, it's pretty simple to me. I saw a couple of times that Obama was there and Kamala Harris was vice president, was, having him introduce him to certain people, which everybody knows who he was, but they were having this conversation and Joe was behind them. Mm-hmm. President Biden was behind them trying to get involved in the conversation, and, poor Joe was being left out on purpose, and they kept having this conversation, and at other time he was there trying to talk to them, and it was almost like, okay, hold on, let us finish, then we'll come to you. And I thought, would this happen to a John Kennedy or a Ronald Reagan or even a Bill Clinton, Bush, or Trump? You think Trump wouldn't allow it, but yeah. There's a reverence for the President of the United States that should be there not only for everyone that's in the room, but also, especially for a previous president to show that you're in charge now. Yeah, well, and that did not show that Joe Biden was in charge of anything.
George Bush has been there before, and he's often Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President. Yeah. And if you look at how the military does when we handle presidents that come in to certain protocols and certain things, which is signed in the office of the president, on those protocol procedures, the president is the highest rank, period. Yeah. There's no other. The sitting president is the man. After that, when the presidents do arrive, it is the oldest former president.
Correct.
Then the next oldest former. Then the next oldest former, and the new guys on the guy that just got out of office, or the next guy last. He's down the end, and he's not as important. But they do that for a reason, is because nothing retains the respect higher than the office of the president. Whether you respect the guys or not, I'm not a big Joe Biden fan, but Joe Biden is the president of the United States.
Absolutely.
And no matter what, when he walks in the room, if former President Bush was there, former President Clinton was there, or former President Obama there, the conversation should have been about the president until he left.
And not only that, both of those, the former president and the current vice president, both should have understood that completely, and he should have never been behind, never been to the left, and they were to the right. Yeah. The conversation and the appearance should have been that here is President Biden bringing in the former president. The former president is patting Joe on the back.
And
here we go. He's here with me.
He will be on his left side.
And the vice president should be behind him.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about because she's a woman. I don't get all freaked out.
Because she's the vice president.
She's the vice president.
But she's not a former president.
Absolutely.
The former president should have been to Joe Biden's left at all times. Mm-hmm. And Joe Biden, the president, should have been the center of attention.
It looked like Obama was campaigning for himself.
Yeah. And the deal is President Obama been in that office for 8 years.
He knows.
And he knows because he had a perfect example that showed him utmost respect, which was George W. Bush. And he should have learned from there. And he should have goes, hey, guys, I'm glad to be here, but let's get it back to the president. And we can talk this out on the lawn where, I'll smoke a cigarette with you with no cameras around.
Sure.
And things like that. But let's get it back to the president. That's what he should have done.
Sure, and the appearance that it gives, it's like the appearance that it gives not only to the American people to show that we have this president that you want us to be behind, but also shows the appearance to the world that there is no strength in this guy because he's not being shown to be that way.
Got the puppet strings going down.
There was a picture or a video of President Trump pushing somebody out of the way to get in front of them somewhere overseas. You probably remember it better than me. But it wasn't that he was being an ass. He was letting them know that, wait a minute, I am the United States president of the biggest, baddest country in the world. You're not putting me behind someone. Now, I'm not
Exactly.
saying that President Biden should have pushed former President Obama out of the way, but he could have just had a tap and said, hey, I'm the president now.
So what we had was that moment, if we go back into time, there's that moment when some little guy named Napoleon got his crown. And if we remember when he got his crown, if you remember what happened in history, he went and the priest came out to present the crown and was going to put it on his head. And Napoleon went, and he took the power away from him, and he goes,
Put it on his own head.
put it on his own head, and says, I'm the guy in charge. You go preach for me. You're not the guy in charge.
Do you think that this is just a new way of thinking by the left that, okay, we don't have a one person in charge. We don't have one or two people in charge. We have an ideology and party in charge. And the people that actually, if you ask people right now, who is the number one person of the Democratic Party visually, they would probably say Barack Obama.
Or Nancy Pelosi.
Or Nancy Pelosi. So, or in their thinking of, identity being, at times it's the number one thing, and other times it's don't prop this old white president up. Then let's look at this as, well, why is it such a big deal? He was just showing reverence to former President Obama.
No.
No, I don't believe that for a minute.
No.
But I'm just trying to, sometimes I have to try to think outside of the box of what is considered to be normal, but you have to think, what is normal? Is it the new normal, or is it the old traditional normal?
Well, this is the new way we would like for it to be, is we just want somebody in front of our party out there and we'll control them, is what we'd like for it to be.
And second thing, this is what I was going to get to, and I think you will agree with this. Imagine if Obama was president now, and George W. Bush came back with, and George W. Bush acted that way, and they kept pushing Obama back and just talking to everybody, and Obama was left over here by himself. What do you think the media and the left and the race baiters would say?
Oh, it'd be a race issue.
It would be, well, he's
It'd
doing
be-
that
it'd be a
because
race
he's
issue.
a white president. He's doing this to a black president. He's
It'd be a
doing
race
this as
issue.
the old white guy to the young. So I'm saying appearances matter.
But I will say, they do. And, no matter what anybody wants to think about George W. Bush, he was a persona of showing respect to predecessors and people who followed him. He never talked bad about anybody that came in after him. He made a point not to do that, where he had every right to. He didn't ever talk bad about the people that came in before him, even though they stole the dishes out of the White House, and even though they treated his dad like crap until after they got their 8 years over with.
And you're right. And it showed that.
And when he came up with the Obamas, he never made himself to be the center of attention.
Well, he respected the position of
Yes.
the United States president because the Obamas had written about it and spoke about it. And it's funny for some people to believe this, but from what I understand, there's a true love from the Obamas to the Bushes.
Yep.
And it all goes back to the way that they were treated by President Bush and his wife Laura when they were moving out and the Obamas were coming in. From what I understand, the Obamas were just blown away at the amount of respect and love and politeness that they got from them. It's that change of power, that peaceful exchange of power, as we call it, that Trump didn't learn. Trump
he didn't.
That's one of the things that Trump did not understand. The position, to me, this is just my opinion, he did not respect the traditional value and thought process of the position of President of the United States. And even though he lost the election, maybe he thought he should have won the election. He probably should have won the election if it would have been for the pandemic and a few other things that happened. But he still didn't respect it like it should have been.
Yeah.
And back to this, I don't think President Obama and Kamala Harris respected the position of Joe Biden being the 46th president of the United States by what they did. And the appearance to that was not just seen by people here in America. It was seen around the world.
So I will say this, Coach, and we're going to play make-believe for a second. But if President Biden was sitting there as the president, and the second he walks in the room and the Hail to the Chief plays, okay, and he comes in, and then a former president, if it could happen, if George Washington was to walk in that room, everybody most likely would try to flock to him.
Yep.
But George Washington would be the first to say, that is the president.
Yeah.
He would be the first to say that. And he would be like, let's get back to here. Let's get back to here. I'm only a spectator now. And that's where we're missing the point. Is the whole deal is we took the power willingly for some ego purposes. And hey, it stroked my ego, so I'm liking everybody talking to him because it hadn't happened in a long time. And the vice president, the sitting vice president, who should know better as well, sit there and went down that lane, and we want her to be president one day. You're like, oh my gosh, you don't even know how to act when your president, the president of the United States of America, is in a room.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so we wonder where the disrespect to the office of the president lies.
Sure.
It lies within his own party. I mean, come on.
Well, and not only that, you heard when President Trump was president that early on the first year or two, we just wish he would be more presidential. He is not acting presidential. And I agree with some of that stuff,
Yeah.
from the traditional way that the president acted. But then you actually have now the people that were saying that at the same time are doing exactly the same thing, not being presidential and not treating the president with the respect. So it's like, it's just become such a party thing. You use George Washington, the old thing of, the political parties was what he was terrified of. Of course he would have respected the presidency more because he stepped down. He could have ran it until he wanted to and would have won. There was no term limit at that time. But he understood what it meant to be president of the United States. And it's the visual that everyone sees, because he did not want France and Spain and Great Britain to look at us and go, they have another king. He wanted them to look at that. This democracy that we have created is so unique that someone like me that can be elected for life was going to step down because we're we the people and not I the people. And we don't see that.
So I fault former President Obama because he should have said something. He's been there 8 years, and he had a fine example showing him how to do it with George W. Bush. I fault the Vice President, Kamala Harris, for kowtowing to that and not going, hey, this is the president. I will talk to you later. Nice to meet you, Mr. President. We'll go smoke a cigarette in a minute. I also fault the current president for not having that intestinal fortitude to say, hey, dude, I'm the man. Shut the flip up.
Well, I do think about that, too, and you're right. And Joe Biden used to be a firecracker.
Yeah.
Why is he not now?
And then there's another piece that has a lot to blame in this, and that is the media. Because the media executives should have said, okay, this is happening, but we're not gonna feed it, and let's just stick to Joe Biden. But they didn't do that because that's their golden boy. Sure.
As much as we've talked about in the last 2.5 years about there are people that are terrified to do certain things, to be called certain names. We've seen that a lot when it comes to, don't do that, we could be called a racist or a homophobic or whatever. Do you think maybe, this is just asking you, that Joe Biden and his people close to him couldn't say anything because they were terrified of making it look like they were telling an African-American president, the first one ever, and a woman of color vice president, first one ever, to get behind me?
Yeah, the media probably would have portrayed that, and that might have been the catalyst for what is the article? That might have been
25.
Yeah, that might have been a catalyst for that. To be honest,
or the 25th Amendment. Yeah,
the 25th Amendment. It might have been a catalyst for that. And Joe Biden, now that you say that, I agree. And and then of course the progressives, petrified and ecstatic because they
walk
had the
around
first
with eggshells all the time now.
They would be ecstatic because they had the first female president of the United States, and she'd be African American. But they would be also nervous as heck because that girl can't manage a damn thing right now, so.
Yeah, Joe Biden, I mean, if he even thought about it, if he even has the mind to think about it that way, going, you know what, I don't like this, and they should be respecting me, and yes, Barack, and yes, Kamala, y'all get behind me, go sit down over there, and I'll walk over here because I'm the President of the United States. Just because of the culture and the climate, I guess the best way to say it, in the last 5 or 6 years of our country, it's really hard sometimes to state your position if someone you're stating it to is considered to be a minority.
So let me say this, and because what happened is blatantly obvious to me, coming from the military, where we're used to having a commander being in for 2 or 3, if they're at like a 2 or 3 star level, they might be 3 years. 3 or 4 star level, but below that is normally a 2-year period. Mm-hmm. They're used to being the commander, and a first sergeant or a sergeant major is used to being there 2 years. And then when you change out, you were loved for 2 years or you were hated. One of the two.
Yeah.
Okay, you were loved or hated, but if you were loved, the troops love you. But we had a rule is if he's the guy replacing me, it was all about him the second the guidon swapped out or the color swapped out. And it even went to soldiers would come up and say, well, we'd like to talk to you after. You can talk to me up to the ceremony, but after the ceremony, I'm no longer your this. I'm no longer your commander. I'm no longer your sergeant major. I'm no longer your first sergeant. You have to talk to him. And I support whatever he says. We are so used to that that it is so blatantly sad when we see it as former soldiers because you're like, oh, they did not just do that as the highest position in the land.
Well, I mean, you have to think about it like this. I mean, just from a simple, I love your analogy talking about the military, but let's look at it as a coaching standpoint. Let's say Jimmy Johnson is coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And let's say him and Barry Switzer got along pretty well. And then Barry Switzer becomes coach. And a couple years down the road, they ask Jimmy to come back. And they come back and the media, the front office, the players, and everyone went to Jimmy Johnson and just wanted to talk to Jimmy Johnson. And Barry Switzer's just standing there like, and it was the Barry Switzer press conference it was supposed to be. How do you think the ESPN, how do you think all of us would look, wait a minute, we have a new, this is the new guy.
Yeah, you do that at the Hall of Fame. You do that at the Hall of Fame. You know, you do that somewhere else.
But if you, and you have to think about it this way too, if you are a liberal and Joe Biden is your president because you wanted anyone but Donald Trump as your president, they're not going to point out anything that looks like it's wrong because then they have to admit that their guy did something wrong or they made a decision that was wrong by voting for this guy as their nominee instead of another one. They're never going to vote for Trump. They're never going to say, well, I should have voted for President Trump over this. They're always going to have that. But what we're about to see is another turn coming here when the election in November is going to happen, and then you're going to have a new presidential election in a year and a half start after that. Well, 2 years after, but a year and a half it'll really be going. What do you think is going to happen if someone like a DeSantis or someone even on the left stands up and acts presidential? Are they going to be called the old, white, patriarchal ABCDE that we don't need anymore? What we need is someone that just falls in line with everybody. Because is the president changing? Is the president of the United States' role in society, in our country, and in the world, is it changing because of our culture change in America?
I think it's changing because, well,
I'm not saying we want it to, but is it doing it? Is it evolving to that because of our culture?
I think it's going back to a president seeing the world as it is, or the president seeing the world as he wants it to be. And what he wants it to be might not be achievable or might not be doable without extorting a lot of money from the American people. So I think that goes back and forth between parties, okay? Is normally, for what we've seen is, from my viewpoint, the presidents that come up that wear the R word, they kind of see the world as it is. And the last few times, the 3 times that we had Democrat presidents, they see the world for what they want it to be.
You mean like a utopian society?
Yes. Now,
you're good about that.
Has the office of the president changed? The office of the president has diminished in the last 2 terms.
Why?
Because how we used to have the presidency, it was always regarded as prim and proper and respectful. Although that's not necessarily the case either, because everybody says that nobody ever dogged out George W. Bush, but they did. They used to make pictures of him as a monkey in these big ears and being dumb as a box of rocks and everything else.
I've studied most presidents from Kennedy up. And of course, I know a little bit about Eisenhower, but from Kennedy up, and there was the right that was. Remember when Kennedy came to Dallas, the weekend that, the Friday he was assassinated, someone had taken out a huge ad that said wanted for treason and listed all these things that he had done. Nixon was a crook. LBJ was this, that, and the other. I mean, Jimmy Carter was a dummy.
Ronald Reagan, they rioted they shot the man. They rioted in the streets, called him a baby killer, called him a person that was going to start a nuclear war, which he was farthest from that. He prevented a lot of nuclear wars. But they said that we will go to World War III if he, anytime a liberal gets in front of a camera and they tell you we're going to World War III, we're going to go to World War III over this president, it's completely the opposite. Like, he's saving us from World War III.
Well, and that was my point, was you're always going to have the politics part where, this president, if he's not your party, you're going to say bad things about him. But what used to happen even though that was the case, you still respected the president's, the position of the president, even when it was Clinton or when it was George W. Bush, when there was a world issue or when there was an American issue that we needed to pull together, that person was looked at as, okay, lead us. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's the party and the ideology that you're being led by more than the actual office or even the legislature. And now if you even have judicial makes, the first thing that you hear when the judicial makes a decision is, was it a Trump nominee? Was it an Obama nominee?
Yeah.
Was it a 6-3 court? Was it a 5-4 court?
Oh, not that it was just a decision, you know.
No, so.
And right now we're in the laissez-faire leading in the world. So
Yeah, there you
anyway,
go.
so from the coach
To the vet.
it's time to stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned.